After a terrible argument with her wealthy boyfriend about suspicious business, a single mother takes her 6-year-old daughter and drives away on a rural road. What she doesn't realize is that he had put something in her drink minutes before. Suddenly, she feels dizzy and loses consciousness at the wheel, managing to stop the car on the roadside. The man, who had secretly followed her, seizes the moment to execute his sinister plan. He pours gasoline around the vehicle and lights a match before fleeing. The woman awakens to the acrid smell of smoke filling the car, while her daughter screams desperately in the back seat, trying to open doors that won't respond due to child safety locks. The flames spread rapidly when suddenly a majestic white horse appears out of nowhere. What this animal does in the next few seconds defies all human understanding. Before we begin, if you love animals as much as we do, please subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any thrilling stories. Thank you. Now, let's get back to our story. The suffocating heat flooded her lungs before Marina could even fully open her eyes. A throbbing pain hammered at her head as reality materialized around her like a terrible nightmare. The acrid smell of smoke mixed with burning gasoline created a dense, asphyxiating atmosphere inside the car that just minutes ago had represented safety for her and her daughter. "Mommy! Mommy!" Sophia's desperate voice echoed from the back seat, laden with a panic no 6-year-old should ever experience. The little girl's small hands beat frantically against the window, trying to find an escape that didn't seem to exist. "I can't open it. Please, Mommy, wake up." Marina tried to move, but her limbs responded as if submerged in molasses. Her vision oscillated between moments of clarity and a strange fog that clouded her thoughts. Why did she feel so weak? Why couldn't she remember how she had gotten there, on this country road she didn't recognize? Flames danced outside the windows, like orange demons, creating sinister shadows that moved in a hypnotic rhythm. The car's metal was beginning to heat up dangerously, and Marina could feel the heat penetrating through the glass and bodywork. Time was running out quickly, but her mind still struggled to process the gravity of the situation. "Sophia, my little one, Mommy's here," she managed to murmur, forcing her vocal cords to produce sound despite her smoke-parched throat. Each word required a Herculean effort, as if she were emerging from a deep, unsettling sleep. "I'll get you. Out of there, I promise." Through the side window, something caught her attention. A graceful, majestic movement cut through the curtain of smoke. A white horse, of almost ethereal beauty, stopped a few yards from the burning vehicle. Its large, expressive eyes seemed to understand exactly what was happening, demonstrating an intelligence that went beyond common animal instinct. The animal remained motionless for a moment, observing the scene with an intensity that made Marina feel she wasn't completely alone in that desperate moment. There was something in the horse's posture, in the way it held its head high and its ears alert, that conveyed a silent message of hope amidst the chaos. Memory began to return in confused fragments. She vaguely remembered driving back from Edward's house after a tense conversation that had ended strangely. He had insisted she have some tea before leaving, claiming she seemed too nervous to drive safely. Now that apparent kindness took on a sinister meaning. "Mommy, it's getting really hot back here," Sophia cried, her small, frightened voice cutting through Marina's jumbled thoughts. The child had managed to unbuckle her seatbelt, but the child-proof locks on the rear doors wouldn't yield to her desperate efforts. Marina forced her body to react, fighting against the lethargy that seemed to envelop every muscle. She needed to act quickly before the flames reached the fuel tank. The white horse continued to watch, like a silent guardian witnessing her fight for survival. The car's dashboard was starting to melt at the edges, and small flames licked at the bottom of the front doors. Time had become a relentless enemy, each second representing the difference between life and a tragedy that would destroy two innocent lives on that isolated, forgotten road. Suddenly, Marina understood with crystal clarity that this hadn't been an accident. Someone had carefully orchestrated every detail of that terrible moment, and she would need to find strength she didn't even know she possessed to save her daughter and uncover the truth behind those murderous flames. 3 weeks before that terrible moment on the road, Marina was drying another glass at the small coffee shop where she'd worked since Sophia turned 5. The establishment, located downtown, attracted a diverse clientele that included local merchants, public employees, and occasionally business people from neighboring towns passing through on business. Her waitress's salary barely covered basic expenses. The rent for the small apartment where they lived consumed more than half her income, leaving little for food, clothes, and Sophia's school supplies. Each month's end was a financial juggling act that kept her constantly worried about the future she could offer her daughter. "Marina, table 6, called Connie, the owner of the coffee shop, pointing to an elegantly dressed man who had just sat down near the window. He wore an impeccable grey suit, polished shoes that reflected the sunlight, and a watch that even from a distance seemed worth more than Marina's annual salary. Approaching the table with her notepad, Marina noticed the man watching her with an interest that went beyond the menu. His dark eyes followed her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously flattered and slightly uncomfortable. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" she asked with her professional smile, maintaining the cordial tone she had learned to use with all customers. "An espresso and—" He paused, studying her face with excessive attention. "Your name? Have you been working here long?" Marina felt a blush creep up her cheeks. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially from men who clearly belonged to a social class far removed from hers. "Marina, and I've been working here for 2 years. Edward Mitchell," he introduced himself, extending a well-manicured hand. "I have some business in the area and often pass through. It's a shame I've never noticed someone as special as you working in this place." The words were flattering, but there was something in the way he said them that created an odd feeling in Marina's stomach. Perhaps it was just nervousness from receiving attention from someone obviously successful and attractive. Over the following weeks, Edward became a regular customer. He always asked for the same table near the window and always requested Marina to serve him. Gradually, their conversations extended beyond basic orders. He showed genuine interest in her life, asking about Sophia, her dreams, and the difficulties of raising a daughter alone. "A woman like you shouldn't have to worry about bills," he commented one particularly difficult afternoon, when Marina mentioned she would need to work extra shifts to cover the month's expenses. "You deserve to be taken care of, protected. Your daughter, too." Marina felt torn between gratitude for finding someone who seemed genuinely interested in her well-being and an inner voice that whispered caution. She had grown up in a simple family, where her mother had always warned her about men who make grand promises without truly knowing a person. "I'd like to get to know you better," Edward said on a Friday, when the coffee shop's rush had died down. "And your daughter, too. How about we have dinner together on Saturday? I know an excellent restaurant in the next town over." The invitation left her speechless. It had been over 2 years since she had gone out to dinner, since before Sophia was born. The idea of getting dressed up, leaving the house for something other than work and her daughter's school, seemed simultaneously exciting and terrifying. I don't have anyone to leave Sophia with," she murmured, using the most obvious excuse to buy time. "Bring her," Edward replied without hesitation. "It would be a pleasure to meet the daughter of such an extraordinary woman." That night, Marina looked at herself in the mirror of her small bedroom, questioning the true intentions of this man. Was it possible that someone so successful was genuinely interested in her? Or was there something more behind that constant attention and those eyes that seemed to study her every move with calculated precision? The restaurant Edward chose was in a neighboring town, a 40-minute drive from the small house where Marina lived with Sofia. The establishment was too elegant for the standards they were accustomed to, with tables covered in immaculate white, tablecloths, crystal glasses, and uniformed waiters who moved silently among the customers. Sofia held her mother's hand tightly, her large eyes absorbing every detail of the sophisticated environment. The girl wore her best dress, a Christmas present from the previous year that Marina had saved for special occasions. Even so, she felt out of place in that scene of discreet luxury. "You both look stunning," Edward commented upon meeting them. At the entrance, dressed in a navy blue blazer that highlighted his dark eyes. He bent down to Sofia's height, smiling with a gentleness that seemed genuine. "You must be the famous Sofia. Your mother talks so much about you. I feel like we already know each other." The child hid her face behind her mother's skirt, showing the natural shyness of someone unaccustomed to strangers. Marina gently stroked her daughter's hair, trying to convey security in a situation that was new for both of them. During dinner, Edward proved to be an attentive and patient host. He ordered a special dish for Sofia, talked to her about her favorite cartoons, and even brought a small gift, a coloring book with special glow-in-the-dark crayons. "How did you know she likes to draw?" Marina asked, watching Sofia open the gift with eyes shining with joy. "I paid attention when you mentioned it at the coffee shop," Edward replied, lightly touching Marina's hand on the table. "I like to take care of the details that matter to the special people in my life." The touch was brief, but charged with an intimacy that made Marina feel a strange warmth spread through her skin. It had been so long since someone had shown that kind of careful attention to the small aspects of her life. While Sofia concentrated on coloring one of the pages in the book, Edward began to talk about his businesses. He mentioned properties in different cities, diversified investments, and a consulting firm that served important clients in the region. He spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to success, but without excessive arrogance. "You must travel a lot," Marina commented, imagining what it would be like to have the financial freedom to visit different places. "Yes, but lately I've preferred to spend more time in the region," Edward replied, his eyes fixed on her. "I've found more interesting reasons to stay around here." The comment made her blush again. She wasn't used to this kind of romantic attention, especially from someone who seemed to have all the options in the world available to him. After dinner, Edward insisted on driving them home. During the ride, Sofia fell asleep in the back seat, clutching her new book. Edward's car was luxurious and quiet, a completely different experience from the bus Marina usually took to get around town. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Marina said when they arrived in front of the small apartment building where they lived. Sofia loved it. "And you?" Edward asked, turning to face her in the darkness of the car. "Did you enjoy it too?" The question carried an intensity that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. "Yes," she murmured, "very much. I'd like to do it again, soon," Edward said, getting out of the car to open her door. When he helped Marina carry a sleeping Sofia to the apartment, his fingers lingered longer than necessary when they touched hers. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Marina reflected on the contradictory sensations Edward aroused in her. There was gratitude for his kindness to Sofia, the excitement of feeling desired again, but also an indefinable restlessness she couldn't quite name. In the 2 weeks following the dinner, Edward became a constant presence in Marina's and Sofia's lives. He appeared at the coffee shop more frequently, always bringing small gifts, flowers for Marina, special treats for Sofia, children's books that the girl devoured with growing enthusiasm. "You don't have to spend so much on us," Marina protested one afternoon when he arrived with an expensive doll for Sophia and a delicate jewelry set for her. "You already do too much for us." "Let me spoil you," Edward replied, caressing Marina's face with apparent tenderness. "You deserve all the good things life can offer, and I can afford to provide them." Sophia had become less shy with Edward, running to hug him whenever she saw him arrive. The child, who for years had lived only with her mother and their meager resources, was enchanted by the constant attention and gifts. For a 6-year-old girl, Edward represented the father figure she had never had. Marina felt torn between gratitude and a growing concern. Her maternal instincts warned that Sophia was becoming attached too quickly to a man they had known for such a short time. But her daughter's genuine happiness and her own emotional needs made her question if she wasn't being overly cautious. "I'd like to see where you live," Edward suggested on a Thursday after another afternoon of pampering and attention. "Maybe I could have dinner with you at your place. Something more intimate, familiar." The idea of receiving him in her modest apartment made Marina uncomfortable. The contrast between his world and hers would be even more evident in her small 2-bedroom home, with simple furniture and appliances that worked more by miracle than efficiency. "Our home is very simple," Marina said, trying to hide her insecurity. "We don't have anything like the places you frequent." "I don't care about luxury when I'm with people I love," Edward replied, using for the first time the word that made Marina's heart race dangerously. "I care about you." The following Saturday, Edward arrived at the apartment carrying bags from a high-end grocery store. He brought ingredients to prepare an elaborate dinner, fine wine, and even new toys for Sophia. The generosity was overwhelming and at the same time slightly invasive. "You didn't have to bring so much," Marina protested, watching him unload. "Groceries sufficient for several weeks." "I want to take care of you," Edward replied, organizing the groceries in the small kitchen with a familiarity that seemed premature. "A woman like you shouldn't worry about these practical matters." During dinner, Edward made comments about the apartment that, though complimentary on the surface, carried an undercurrent of superiority. He suggested improvements, mentioned contacts who could get them a more suitable place to live, talked about private schools where Sophia could develop her full potential. "Sophia is doing very well at her current school," Marina defended, feeling obligated to justify her life choices. "Of course she is," Edward agreed quickly, touching her hand, reassuringly. "I'm just thinking about the opportunities she could have. You both deserve the best." After dinner, while Sophia played with the new toys in the living room, Edward helped Marina with the dishes. It was then that he made a proposal that left her speechless. "Have you ever thought about quitting your job at the cafe?" he asked, casually, drying a plate. "You could just take care of Sophia, dedicate yourself entirely to being a mother. I'd support you both." The offer was simultaneously tempting and terrifying. It represented financial security, but also total dependence on a man she had known for less than a month. Marina felt as if she were at a crossroads that would completely define her and her daughter's future. "That's very generous," she murmured, "but I don't know if it would be right to accept." Edward's eyes gleamed with a new, harder intensity. "Why wouldn't it be right to take care of the people we love?" he asked, and for the first time, Marina noticed an expectation of a specific answer in his voice. Edward's proposal remained on Marina's mind throughout the following week, creating a whirlwind of contradictory emotions that kept her awake late into the night. The financial security he offered represented a dream she had never imagined possible. But something in her maternal intuition whispered caution. "Mummy, why didn't Uncle Edward come today?" Sophia asked on Wednesday, looking out the coffee shop window as if expecting to see him appear on the street at any moment. Marina realized with growing concern how quickly her daughter had become accustomed to Edward's constant presence. The child talked about him all day, drew figures that clearly represented him, and carefully guarded all the gifts she received as if they were precious treasures. "He must be busy with work," Marina replied, trying to sound natural, although she herself was finding his sudden absence strange after weeks of constant attention. On Thursday, Edward reappeared with a smile that seemed forced and an even more expensive gift for Sophia. A pink bicycle with training wheels and sparkling embellishments that cost more than Marina's monthly salary. "I thought Sophia was old enough to learn to ride a bike," he explained, watching the girl's eyes light up with joy. "We can teach her together in the park on Sunday." The word "together" echoed in Marina's mind with a strange weight. Edward spoke, as if they were already an established family, making decisions about Sophia's upbringing without consulting her first. Although the intention seemed kind, there was an unsettling presumption in his attitude. During lunch, Edward casually mentioned that he had stopped by their apartment on Tuesday. "I wanted to surprise you, but you weren't home. Where did you go?" The seemingly innocent question caused Marina profound discomfort. How did he know exactly where they lived? She had only given him the address once, and he hadn't written it down. Besides, Tuesday was Sophia's doctor's appointment, information she hadn't shared with him. "Sophia's routine checkup," she replied, observing his reaction carefully. "Ah, of course, I should have guessed," Edward said, but his eyes showed a knowledge that went beyond simple deduction. "Next time, let me know. I can drive you in my car, much more comfortable than the bus." Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. She had never mentioned they had taken the bus to the appointment. How could he know such a specific detail? At the end of the week, Edward showed up at the coffee shop with a new cell phone. "For you," he said, placing the device on the table sparhabically. "Yours is very old. This one has internet, a better camera, all the modern features." The phone was state-of-the-art, costing several times what Marina earned per month. Though grateful for the generosity, she felt uncomfortable with such expensive and constant gifts. "I've already installed all the useful apps," Edward continued, showing her the features, "including a location tracker for your safety. If an emergency happens, I can find you quickly." The mention of the location tracking app set off all of Marina's internal alarms. Why would Edward feel the need to track her movements? What kind of emergency would justify this level of monitoring? "I don't know if I need such a sophisticated phone," Marina protested gently. "Of course you do," Edward replied, and for the first time, his voice carried a tone that brooked no argument. "A woman with a young child should have all available safety resources. Besides, I want to be able to talk to you whenever I miss you." That night, Marina examined the new phone with mixed feelings. It was undoubtedly superior to her old device, but it represented another way for Edward to insert himself into her daily life. Every gift, every kindness seemed to come with an unstated expectation of increasing control over her decisions and movements. For the first time since she had met him, Marina began to seriously question the true motivations behind all that seemingly disinterested generosity. The discovery happened by chance on a Sunday morning when Marina decided to thoroughly clean her car before heading out to the park with Sophia. She had found a little extra money at the end of the month and wanted to take the opportunity to give some special attention to the vehicle that, though old, was her most valuable possession. While vacuuming the seats, her fingers touched something strange stuck to the underside of the driver's seat. It was a small rectangular device, the size of a matchbox, attached with duct tape. Marina removed it carefully, her heart accelerating as she examined the unknown object. The device had a small light that blinked intermittently and a serial number engraved on the side. She wasn't a tech expert, but she instinctively understood that it shouldn't be there. Someone had installed some kind of tracking device in her car without her knowledge or consent. "Mummy, are we going to the park soon?" Sophia called from the apartment window, eager to try out the new bike Edward had given her. "We'll be right there, sweetie," Marina replied, pocketing the device with trembling hands. Her mind worked frantically, connecting dots that now formed a disturbing pattern. Edward's casual appearances in places where she didn't expect to find him, his knowledge of her schedules and activities, his insistence on the phone with the location tracking app. During the outing in the park, Marina watched Edward interact with Sophia with heightened attention. He continued to be gentle and patient with the girl, teaching her to balance on the bike with genuine care. But now Marina noticed a subtle possessiveness in his gestures, a way of talking about Sophia as if the child already belonged to him. "She's learning quickly," Edward commented, watching Sophia pedal with growing confidence. "She's smart like her mother. You two are very special to me." "Edward," Marina began, trying to keep her voice calm, "I need to talk to you about something important." He turned to her with full attention, but Marina noticed an almost imperceptible tension in his expression. "Of course. You can talk to me about anything." "I found something strange in my car today," Marina said, pulling the device from her pocket. "Do you know what this is?" The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough for Marina to notice the subtle change in Edward's expression. His smile remained in place, but his eyes became harder, more calculating. "Ah, that," Edward said finally, with a tone that tried to sound casual. "I had it installed for your safety. A single woman with a young child can never be too careful." "Without telling me?" Marina asked, feeling anger rise in her chest. "Without my permission?" "I didn't want to worry you with technical details," Edward replied, approaching her so Sophia couldn't hear the conversation. "It's just a precaution. If something happened to you, I could find you immediately." "That's an invasion of privacy," Marina said, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "You had no right to do that." For the first time since she had met him, Edward completely dropped his gentle facade. His eyes narrowed, and his voice took on a cold tone that made her instinctively step back. "Right?" he repeated with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I have the right to protect the people I love, especially when they don't have enough experience to protect themselves." The sentence carried a veiled threat that made Marina understand, with crystal clarity, that Edward had never seen her as an equal partner. To him, she was an object to be possessed, controlled, kept under constant surveillance. Sophia, too, was merely an extension of that possession. "Mommy, look how far I'm going!" Sophia shouted happily, pedaling in circles nearby, completely oblivious to the tension between the adults. Marina forced a smile for her daughter, but her world had completely changed in the last few minutes. She finally saw Edward for who he really was, and the discovery terrified her more than any danger she had ever faced in her life. After discovering the tracking device, Marina spent 3 days avoiding Edward. She didn't show up at the coffee shop during her usual hours, swapped shifts with a co-worker, and kept Sophia indoors whenever possible. But she knew she couldn't hide forever. On Wednesday, Edward showed up at her apartment unannounced. Marina heard the doorbell ring insistently for several minutes before deciding to answer, with Sophia hidden in the bedroom as instructed. "You're avoiding me," Edward said as soon as she opened the door, his voice laden with a coldness that made her feel immediately threatened. "That's not smart, Marina." "I'm not avoiding anyone," Marina lied, keeping the door only slightly ajar. "I've been busy." "Busy avoiding the people who care about you," Edward retorted, forcing his way into the apartment with a firmness that brooked no resistance. "We need to talk seriously. Once." Inside, Edward closed the door behind him and leaned against it, effectively blocking Marina's exit. For the first time, she felt completely trapped in her own home. "Where's Sophia?" Edward asked, looking around the small apartment. "At a little friend's house," Marina lied again, praying her daughter would stay quiet in the bedroom. "Liar," Edward said simply, walking towards the bedrooms. "Sophia, come here. Uncle Edward brought something special for you." The girl appeared at the bedroom door, still wearing her mid-afternoon pajamas. Her eyes lit up when she saw Edward, but she sensed the tension in the air and stayed close to her mother. "Good to see you, Princess," Edward said, crouching down to the child's level. "I missed you a lot. Your mother told me you were busy, but I knew she was just being stubborn." Marina felt her blood run cold, hearing Edward speak so intimately to Sophia while simultaneously undermining her as a mother. The manipulation was subtle but unmistakable. "Marina," Edward continued, standing up and fixing his eyes on hers with disturbing intensity, "we need to establish some rules about how our family is going to work." "Our family?" Marina repeated, her voice trembling with indignation and fear. "We are not a family." Edward's smile vanished completely. "Yes, we are. And you're going to learn to accept that, or things will get very difficult for both of you." At that moment, Marina realized she had spent too long denying the obvious. Signs. Edward wasn't just controlling, he was dangerous. His veiled threats had become explicit, and she finally understood she needed to act quickly to protect Sophia. "Get out of my house," Marina said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Now." "Or what?" Edward asked, taking a step towards her. "Are you going to call the police? Tell them that a respectable man in the community is trying to take care of a single mother and her daughter? Who do you think they'll believe?" The question hit Marina like a punch to the gut. Edward was right about his influence in the community. He was wealthy, respected, known for his discreet philanthropy. She was just a waitress with no resources or important connections. "Mommy," Sophia murmured, sensing the growing fear in her mother's voice and clinging to her leg. Edward looked at the child with an expression that mixed genuine affection and sick possessiveness. "Don't worry, Sophia. Uncle Edward will take care of everything. Your mother just needs to learn to trust the people who want what's best for you." Marina pulled Sophia closer, her maternal instinct overriding her fear. Any hesitation she might still have had about Edward's true intentions vanished completely at that moment. "Let's go out," Edward announced, walking towards the door. "The three of us together. I have something important to show you at my house." The way he pronounced "my house" sounded less like an invitation and more like a sentence, making Marina understand that they had reached the decisive moment of their lives. Edward's mansion was on the outskirts of town, isolated by high walls and electronic gates that closed automatically as soon as the car passed through. Marina held Sophia on her lap the entire journey, whispering reassuring words, while her own mind worked frantically for a way to escape the situation. The property was even more imposing than Marina had imagined. Meticulously manicured gardens stretched for acres, with security cameras discreetly positioned at strategic points. The house itself looked more like an elegant fortress than a welcoming home. "Welcome to what will be your new home," Edward announced as he parked in the underground garage. "Sophia, you're going to love the room I've prepared especially for you." The girl looked around with wide eyes, impressed by the evident luxury, but sensing her mother's tension. "I want to go home, Mommy," she murmured softly. "Soon, sweetie," Marina replied, though she didn't know if she'd be able to keep that promise. The interior of the mansion was decorated with impeccable taste, but there was something cold and calculated in every detail. Edward led them through seemingly endless corridors until they reached a spacious office lined with bookshelves filled with books and documents. "Sit down," Edward said, indicating a leather armchair for Marina. It wasn't an invitation, but an order disguised as politeness. While Sophia played with some expensive toys Edward kept strategically placed in the office, Marina observed the walls covered with diplomas, certificates and photographs documenting a life of apparent success. But there was something in the images that disturbed her. Edward always appeared alone, even at social events where other people were present. "You must be wondering why I brought you here," Edward said, pouring himself an expensive whiskey. Without offering Marina anything, "It's time to clarify a few things about our future together." Marina remained silent, but her eyes discreetly searched for possible exits. The windows were high and protected by decorative grills that looked more like gilded cages. "I'll be direct," Edward continued, walking to a table where piles of organized documents lay. "My business requires absolute discretion. People who are part of my life need to understand the importance of silence and loyalty." He picked up a folder and handed it to Marina. "These are contracts that establish our new life together. You'll stop working at the coffee shop, of course. Sophia will be transferred to a private school where she'll receive a proper education. And you two will live here, under my protection." Marina opened the folder with trembling hands and felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. The documents weren't simple relationship contracts. They were papers establishing Edward as Sophia's legal guardian and transferring all decision-making rights over both their lives to him. "This is absurd," Marina whispered, flipping through pages that detailed restrictions on her movements, social contacts, and even correspondence. "You can't force me to sign this." "I can and I will," Edward replied calmly. "The alternative would be much more unpleasant for everyone involved." At that moment, Sophia accidentally knocked over a picture frame from the side table. As Marina bent down to pick it up, she noticed several photographs scattered on the floor, images of her and Sophia taken without her knowledge over the past few weeks, photos of them leaving the apartment, in the park, at Sophia's school, even through their home window. "You've been watching us the whole time," Marina murmured, nausea rising in her stomach. "Protecting," Edward corrected, "and I will continue to protect, but now officially and permanently." Sophia sensed the change in the adult's mood and approached her mother, seeking safety in the familiar embrace. Marina pulled her close, understanding. She had completely underestimated the extent of Edward's obsession. "And if I refuse?" Marina asked, though she already knew the answer from the cold expression in his eyes. "You won't refuse," Edward said simply, "because you love your daughter too much to put her in unnecessary danger." The veiled threat echoed through the office like a funeral bell, making Marina realize she had fallen into a meticulously planned trap from the first day Edward had appeared at the coffee shop. Edward left Marina and Sophia alone in the office for a few minutes, claiming he needed to take an important call at the back of the property. It was enough time for Marina to examine the documents scattered on the table more closely, discovering information that terrified her even more. Among the papers, she found suspicious bank transfers, contracts with shell companies, and correspondence mentioning elimination of problems and disposal of evidence. Edward wasn't just a controlling businessman, he was involved in, clearly, criminal activities that explained his obsessive need for silence and control. "Mommy, can I play in the garden?" Sophia asked, pointing to the glass doors that led to an inner courtyard. "No, sweetie. Stay close to Mommy," Marina replied, pulling her daughter closer as she continued to examine the documents. She needed to find something she could use against Edward, some evidence that would force him to leave them alone. An unsealed envelope caught her attention. Inside were photographs of other women, all young, all with small children, all with expressions of fear similar to what Marina felt at that moment. On the back of each photo, there were handwritten notes with dates and disturbing comments about submission levels and suitability for prolonged control. Marina felt her blood run cold as she understood she wasn't the first vulnerable woman Edward had targeted. The other images showed faces that seemed to have disappeared from their previous lives, replaced by empty, resigned expressions. What happened to them? She whispered to herself, studying each photograph with growing horror. Sophia, bored with the papers occupying all her mother's attention, had found a slightly open drawer and was pulling something colorful from inside. "Mummy, look!" It was a child's toy phone, pink and decorated with cartoon character stickers. Marina took it from her daughter's hands and examined it, discovering it still worked. In the messages, she found desperate conversations from a child named Alice trying to contact her grandmother, asking for help to get out of the bad man's house. The messages dated back 6 months and ended abruptly on a Tuesday. The last message simply read, "He found the phone, Mommy, help." "Oh my God," Marina murmured, understanding that Alice and her mother had been previous victims of Edward. What had happened to them? Why had the messages stopped so suddenly? Footsteps in the hallway announced Edward's return. Marina quickly pocketed the phone and spread the documents out as they were, before pulling Sophia onto her lap in an attempt to appear natural. "I apologize for the interruption," Edward said upon entering, but his eyes scanned the office carefully, as if looking for signs that Marina had touched something she shouldn't have. "We were just waiting," Marina replied, forcing a smile as her heart pounded erratically. "Excellent. I hope you used the time to reflect on our conversation." Edward approached the table and began organizing the papers with precise movements. "Have you made a decision about the contracts?" Marina knew any hesitation would be interpreted as defiance. "I need more time to read everything carefully," she said, trying to buy time to think of an escape strategy. "Of course," Edward agreed, but his voice carried a poorly disguised impatience. "But not too much time. I have other urgent matters that require my attention, and I'd prefer to resolve our situation quickly." The way he pronounced resolve made Marina remember Alice's desperate messages. How many other women had sat in that same chair, flipping through similar contracts, discovering too late that they had walked into a trap from which there might be no escape? "Sophia seems tired," Edward observed, looking at the girl struggling against sleep in her mother's lap. "Why don't I take her to see the room I've prepared for her? She can rest while we discuss practical details." The suggestion sounded like a disguised order, and Marina understood that Edward wanted to separate her from Sophia. All her maternal instincts screamed red alert. "She stays with me," Marina said firmly, clutching Sophia to her chest. Edward's eyes narrowed slightly. "Marina, you need to learn to trust me. I'm Sophia's future stepfather. It's natural for me to want to spend time with her." "Not until we sign the papers," Marina replied, surprising herself with her own courage. Edward smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Very well. Then let's speed up this process." Edward picked up an expensive pen from his desk and placed it next to the contracts, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Let's settle this now, Marina. Sign the documents, and we can begin our new life together civilly." Marina looked at the papers that would practically turn her into a prisoner in a gilded cage, along with Sophia. Each clause represented another, lost freedom, another decision she could no longer make about their own lives. "And if I refuse definitively?" she asked, though she knew she was provoking a reaction that could be dangerous. Edward stopped organizing the papers and turned to her slowly. When he spoke, his voice had lost any pretense of kindness. "Then you and Sophia will have a very sad accident on the road home. Country roads can be treacherous, especially at night." The explicit threat hit Marina like a punch to the stomach. There were no more doubts about Edward's intentions or the fate of the previous women. She needed to act quickly before the situation became irreversible. "All right," Marina said, feigning resignation as she picked up the pen. "I'll sign." Sophia had fallen asleep on her lap, Exhausted by the day's emotional tension, Marina carefully settled her in the armchair, covering her with her own jacket. The child's sleeping innocence contrasted brutally with the danger surrounding them. "Wise decision," Edward commented, relaxing slightly. "You'll see, it will be much better for all of us." Marina brought the pen to the first document, but before signing, she looked directly into Edward's eyes. "Can I use the restroom first?" "I'm very nervous." Edward hesitated for a moment, clearly suspicious, but eventually agreed. "Of course. It's the second door on the right down the hall, but don't take too long." Marina rose slowly, kissed sleeping Sophia's forehead, and walked towards the door. In the hallway, instead of going to the restroom, she desperately searched for an exit or a telephone. All the windows she saw had decorative grills, and the phones were in places where Edward could easily see her using them. Finally, she found a back door that led to the gardens. Through the glass, she saw a side gate that seemed less guarded than the main entrance. If she could just get there with Sophia... "Marina!" Edward's voice echoed down the hall, laden with suspicion. "Where are you?" "I'm coming right back," she shouted back, running silently back to the office. Edward was standing beside the armchair where Sophia slept, one hand resting on the child's shoulder in a way that seemed protective, but which Marina interpreted as possessive and threatening. "You took a while," Edward observed. "I was starting to worry." "Sorry, I needed to compose myself," Marina replied, returning to her chair and picking up the pen again. While pretending to read the contracts one last time, Marina mentally devised a desperate plan. When Edward was distracted for any moment, she would grab Sophia and run for the back door, hoping to reach the side gate before he caught her. "Let's get on with this," Edward said impatiently. "Sign the first page." Marina put the pen to the paper, but instead of signing, she suddenly screamed, "Help! Somebody help us!" Edward was momentarily paralyzed by her unexpected audacity. Marina seized those precious seconds to scoop Sophia into her arms and dash towards the door. "You've made a terrible mistake," Edward yelled after her, his voice echoing through the corridors as Marina ran desperately, Sophia waking up frightened in her arms. "Mummy, what's happening?" Sophia whimpered, confused by the abrupt awakening. "We're getting out of here, my little one," Marina panted, racing through the corridors towards the back door. "Hold on tight to Mommy." Behind them, Marina heard Edward's heavy footsteps approaching, accompanied by words that chilled her blood. "You won't leave this property alive if you try to defy me." The back door was in sight, but Marina knew Edward was gaining ground quickly. It would be a desperate race for both their lives. Marina managed to reach the back door seconds before Edward reached the hallway. Her hands trembled violently as she tried to open the various locks protecting the exit. Sophia clung to her neck, terrified by the screams and the desperate chase. "Mummy, I'm scared," Sophia whimpered against her ear. "I know, my little one, but we're going to be okay," Marina whispered, finally managing to open the last lock. The door swung open, revealing the garden illuminated by the property's security lights. Behind her, Marina heard Edward approaching, his voice echoing through the corridors with sinister promises about what would happen when he found them. There was no time for hesitation. They ran across the garden towards the side gate Marina had seen earlier. The grass was damp with dew, making the run more difficult, especially carrying Sophia. Automatic lights switched on as they passed, creating a luminous trail that would make Edward's pursuit easier. "This way," Marina muttered to herself, spotting the gate about 50 yards away. It felt like an eternity, with Edward closing in fast. The side gate was smaller than the main entrance, but still protected by an electronic lock. Marina desperately tried to find a way to open it, but her hands trembled so much she could barely hold Sophia properly. "You're not going anywhere!" Edward shouted, appearing at the back door. In his right hand, he carried something that gleamed under the security lights, a heavy wrench he clearly intended to use as a weapon. Marina felt total panic grip her. The gate wouldn't budge. Edward was approaching with clearly violent intentions, and Sophia was completely dependent on her protection. "Climb on my back and hold tight," Marina whispered to Sophia, helping her daughter position herself. "We're going to climb the wall." The side wall was lower than the other property walls, about 6 or 7 feet high. Marina had never tried to climb anything in her life, but desperation gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Using a nearby tree for support, she managed to boost herself up until she could grab the top of the wall. Sophia held on with all the strength of her small arms, whispering prayers she had learned at school. "Almost there, sweetie," Marina gasped, using the last remnants of her energy to pull herself onto the top of the wall. Edward reached the foot of the tree seconds after Marina managed to balance on top of the wall. His eyes blazed with a fury she had never seen in any human being. "If you come down from there now, I can still be generous," Edward said, his voice controlled but laden with a deadly threat. "But if you try to run, I guarantee you'll never see each other again." Marina looked at the other side of the wall, a drop of nearly 10 feet straight onto the asphalt of the country road. With Sophia on her back, it would be impossible to land without serious injury. "Mommy, I trust you," Sophia whispered in her ear, showing a courage that broke Marina's heart. Edward began to climb the tree, moving with surprising agility for someone of his build. Marina had perhaps 30 seconds before he could reach them. It was then that she heard a sound that completely changed the situation. The distinctive neigh of a horse coming from the road. Looking down, Marina saw an almost miraculous sight. A magnificent white horse galloped freely along the country road, its mane rippling in the night breeze. The animal stopped directly below the wall where Marina and Sophia were perched, as if it understood exactly what was happening. Its intelligent eyes looked up, and Marina had the unmistakable impression that the horse was offering help. "Trust me, Sophia," Marina whispered, preparing for the most important leap of their lives. Marina jumped from the wall with Sophia clinging to her back, landing awkwardly on the white horse's back. The animal stood firm, as if accustomed to rescuing people in desperate situations. Its strong legs absorbed the impact, and it immediately began to trot down the country road, carrying them away from Edward's property. "Unbelievable," Marina murmured, barely able to process that they were riding a wild horse that had appeared at exactly the right moment. Sophia, still frightened but fascinated by the experience, gently stroked the animal's mane. "Is he our guardian angel, Mommy?" Marina looked back and saw Edward at the top of the wall, shouting obscenities and threats that the night wind carried. Away! They were safe for now, but she knew Edward wouldn't give up easily. The horse carried them for almost an hour through quiet country roads, finally stopping near a small, isolated house where a light still shone in the window. Marina carefully slid off the animal, helping Sophia down next. "Thank you," she whispered to the horse, stroking its velvety muzzle. The animal looked at her with those intelligent eyes before trotting off into the darkness, disappearing as it had appeared. The door of the house opened, revealing an elderly woman with a kind face, who immediately realized something was wrong. "My goodness, what happened to you?" "Please," Marina begged, her voice broken by emotional exhaustion. "We need help. A man is trying to hurt us." Rose, as she introduced herself, welcomed them immediately, offering dry clothes, warm food, and a safe place to spend the night. While Sophia finally slept in a comfortable bed, Marina told the elderly woman the whole story, showing her Alice's phone, which she still carried in her pocket. "This man is dangerous," Rose said after hearing everything. "We need to call the authorities. He has influence in town," Marina explained. "I don't know if they'll believe me over his word." It was then that Edward appeared. Marina heard the sound of the car approaching even before she saw it stop in front of Rose's house. Through the window, she watched Edward get out of the vehicle with a gas can in his hand and an expression that left no doubt about his intentions. "Rose, take Sophia and go out the back door," Marina whispered urgently. "Now!" Edward pounded on the door with excessive force. "I know you're in there. Come out now, and no one else needs to get hurt." Marina knew she couldn't involve Rose and Sophia in the final confrontation. She made a desperate decision. She would go out to face Edward alone, giving the others time to escape. "I'm coming out," she shouted through the door, "but leave the others in peace." Edward Mitchell smiled. Statya. Marina appeared on the doorstep, finally showing some sense. "Get in the car. Let's settle this once and for all." Marina looked at Edward's car and then at her own vehicle parked nearby. In a desperate gambit, she asked, "Can I drive my own car? I'd be more comfortable." Edward considered for a moment, clearly calculating if she might try to escape again. "All right, but I'll be following you very closely. Any attempt to run, and the people in this house will pay the price." Marina got into her car, her heart pounding. Edward had added something to her drink back at his house. She vaguely remembered feeling dizzy during the drive earlier. Now, driving in the darkness of the country road, she felt the effects of that sedative returning with a vengeance. Her vision began to blur. The steering wheel felt heavy in her hands. Marina fought against the unconsciousness threatening to overwhelm her, but she finally lost control of the car, which veered to the side of the road and stopped. Edward parked behind her and approached with the gas can. "You chose the hard way," he said, beginning to pour gasoline around her vehicle. "Now you'll pay the consequences." It was at this moment that Marina partially awoke, finding herself in the burning car with a terrified Sophia in the back seat, exactly where our story had begun, with the majestic white horse observing the scene, ready to intervene once more at the crucial moment. The white horse didn't hesitate upon seeing the flames consuming the car. With surprising strength, the animal used its hind hooves to shatter the car's side window, creating an opening large enough for Marina and Sophia to escape seconds before the flames reached the fuel tank. Marina carried Sophia away from the car, just in time to see it explode in a fireball that lit up the entire country road. Both were injured and traumatized, but alive. The horse remained nearby, like a silent guardian protecting them in the darkness. Edward had driven off, believing his plan had worked perfectly. The next morning, he spread the story around town that Marina and Sophia had mysteriously disappeared after an argument, suggesting she might have run off with the child or suffered a tragic accident. But Rose hadn't remained passive. After witnessing Edward threaten Marina, the courageous elderly woman had contacted her nephew, Sergeant Miller, a police officer from a neighboring town who wasn't under Edward's influence. When the wreckage of the car was found, he insisted on a more detailed investigation. The white horse guided Marina and Sophia to a distant farm, where they found shelter with a family of farmhands who welcomed them without asking prying questions. For 2 weeks, Marina recovered physically while devising a plan to expose Edward. Alice's phone, which Marina still carried, became a crucial piece of evidence. The child's desperate messages, combined with the documents Marina had memorized in Edward's office, provided vital clues about his crimes. "We need to be very careful," explained Sergeant Miller. "Edward has powerful connections. We need irrefutable evidence." Marina led him to the wreckage of the car, which had been left on the road. Sergeant Miller found traces of intentionally spilled gasoline and tire tracks, proving another vehicle had been present at the time of the fire. The investigation deepened when Marina bravely agreed to wear a hidden recorder during a meeting with Edward. She sought him out, claiming to have survived the accident and being willing to accept his conditions to protect Sophia. Edward, surprised but cautious, agreed to meet her in a public place. His arrogance proved to be his downfall. Convinced of his impunity, he confessed details about the intentional fire and made explicit threats against other people who knew too much. "You should have died in that car," Edward said during the recording, his voice laden with coldness, "but I can easily correct that mistake." The recordings, combined with the physical evidence and Rose's testimony, were enough to obtain a search warrant for Edward's mansion. The police found much more than they expected: files on other missing women, documents from shell companies, and evidence of corruption involving several prominent figures in the region. The final confrontation took place at a public hearing where Marina, supported by pro bono lawyers specializing in domestic violence cases, presented her testimony. Edward tried to maintain his facade of respectability, but the evidence was overwhelming. "This man coldly planned our deaths," Marina declared, her voice firm despite her tears. "And we weren't the first. How many other women and children suffered at his hands?" The community, which had initially believed Edward's version of Marina's disappearance, was shocked to discover the truth. The families of other missing women began to speak out, creating a chorus of voices that Edward could no longer silence. Edward Mitchell was convicted of attempted murder, kidnapping, financial fraud, and other crimes. His fortune was seized to compensate the victims of his schemes, and he faced a sentence that would ensure he could never again threaten an innocent family. Marina and Sophia began a healing process, supported by the community that finally understood the extent of Edward's manipulation. Marina's courage in confronting a powerful man inspired other women to report similar situations of abuse and control. 6 months after the trial, Marina awoke to the soft sound of hooves on the damp morning grass. Through the window of her new house in the countryside, she watched the white horse grazing peacefully in the nearby meadow, its presence bringing the comforting sense of protection that had become part of their lives. The small wooden house was on a rural property Marina had managed to rent, with part of the compensation received after Edward's assets were seized. It was simple, but it offered something she had never experienced before: true peace and a feeling of complete safety. "Mommy, can I give Hope some carrots?" Sophia asked, appearing in the kitchen already dressed for another day of outdoor play. The girl had chosen the horse's name, explaining that it represented the hope that always arrived when they needed it most. "Of course, my little one," Marina replied, preparing breakfast while watching her daughter through the window. Sophia had transformed completely in recent months. The initial trauma had given way to a more confident and courageous child who had found a deep source of healing in nature and animals. Therapy had helped both of them process the traumatic events. Marina had learned to trust her intuition again and to value her own inner strength. She discovered she had always possessed extraordinary courage, but had needed an extreme situation to recognize it. "Good morning, Marina," greeted Mr. Peterson, the owner of the neighboring farm, who had become a father figure to Sophia and a dear friend to Marina. "How are the girls today?" "Doing very well, thank you," Marina replied, pouring coffee for her neighbor, who always stopped by in the early morning to check if they needed anything. The genuine kindness of people like Mr. Peterson and Rose had restored her faith in humanity. During the months of recovery, Marina had discovered talents she didn't know she possessed. She had begun writing about her experience, first as personal therapy, then as a way to help other women in similar situations. Her blog about overcoming adversity and rebuilding her life had gained followers across the country. "I received a letter from the publisher today," Marina told Mr. Peterson, showing him the envelope that had arrived in the morning mail. "They want to publish my story as a book." "That's wonderful," Mr. Peterson smiled, genuinely happy for her success. "Your story will help many women recognize danger signs and find the courage to seek help." Sophia came running back from the fence where she had fed Hope, her eyes shining with the simple joy of a child who could finally just be a child. "Mommy, Hope wants us to ride her today." "Did she really say that?" Marina asked, hugging her daughter. and feeling her heart fill with gratitude for having come this far. "Of course she did. She always talks to me," Sophia replied, with the seriousness only children can muster about magical things. That afternoon, mother and daughter rode together on the white horse that had saved their lives. Riding through the green fields under the golden late afternoon sun became a ritual of freedom and a celebration of the life they had reclaimed. As Hope trotted gently through the meadows, Marina reflected on the journey that had brought them there. They had faced evil in its cruelest and most manipulative form, but they had found strength in each other and in the unexpected kindness of people like Rose, Sergeant Miller, Mr. Peterson, and so many others. "Mommy," Sophia said, snuggling against her mother's back as they rode. "We're happy now, aren't we?" "Yes, we are, my little one," Marina replied, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "And we're going to keep being happy." The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with golden and pink hues that seemed to celebrate not just the end of another day, but the beginning of a completely new life. A life where true love didn't control, but liberated. Where trust was built through consistent actions, not empty words. Where two survivors had found not only safety, but genuine joy and renewed hope. And hope continued to gallop with them through the endless fields, carrying their laughter into the afternoon. Wind, living symbols that even in the most desperate situations, kindness and courage can triumph over evil.